All right, welcome to Trading Nation. I'm Brian Summer, joined now by former Congressman Dr. Ron Paul. Always a pleasure. Dr. Paul, thank you very much for joining us.
Brian, nice to be with you.
All right, you have obviously been very critical of the Fed over the years. We've got a Fed meeting on Wednesday. The economy seems to be doing okay, and we can debate whether the veracity of that is accurate. But what do you think that the Fed seems to have turned from, interest rate hikes to how do they unwind their massive balance sheet? What does the Fed need to do? And don't say break itself up.
admit they can't solve the problem of a balance sheet that's unbearable. They're going to be in trouble if they keep it. They're going to be in trouble if they try to unwind it without raising interest rates, which probably the market wants. Anything they can do to move the market back in the direction of letting the market determine the rate of interest. But they've been messing with that, of course, ever since the Fed's existence. But it's been especially bad, in the last 10, 15 years. I mean, they have driven these interest rates so terribly low, and everybody was recognizing, even when Greenspan was there, well, the interest rates are too low, too long. And then what do? They make them even lower longer, and that's all they have. So the odds of them unwinding that balance sheet, especially, if a correction occurs, which is inevitable after you do this much inflating of the currency, you have distortions, and there will be a correction, and how are they going to unwind it in the midst of a downturn? And I think there's enough evidence around that, even though there's some euphoria on Wall Street, I still think there are serious problems in the economy.
Like what? What would be one or two of the main problems that you see, Dr. Paul?
I think it's the uncontrollable spending and people who are complaining about their jobs and the fact that middle class is still hurting very badly, and yet they're seeing that the wealth accumulates on Wall Street, and this is of course expected. When a monetary policy destroys a currency, it always destroys the middle class. So there's a lot of unhappy people out there, although you can find the statistics currently. But that doesn't mean that the distortions aren't out there, and the longer the distortions have lasted, the bigger the bust will be. So I don't think we're immune from that. We really never got out over the last bust. From 08 and 09, it's been a sluggish economy. Now everybody's hoping, it's starting to pick up. It's almost 2% now. But yes, the GDP report, this week, not too good. And I think sometimes they're biased toward the upside because, if you can include government spending in the GDP, what do? You have the government buy more airplanes and bonds and then borrow the money and print the money and say the GDP is going up? The little bit of GDP growth we have now doesn't represent real growth for the average person.
Yeah, but I will say this, though. We have a Republican president who has promised, he's promised some spending, obviously, for whether it's the wall or infrastructure. We got to figure out sort of how to get there. And Deutsche Bank showing that people without college degrees are now more optimistic than they have been in years. Is there not some reason to be optimistic, the so-called animal spirits being unleashed? Isn't there a positive psychological upward bias?
Well, there's always a bias like that around, but is it very real and is it deserved? In the short run, you can argue that is the case, but on the long run, we spend too much, we borrow too much, we distort the markets, and there's a lot of malinvestment. Nobody talks about the malinvestment. They claim there's no inflation, yet if you look at the inflated prices of stocks and bonds, or the price of education per se, or the cost of medical care, there's tremendous inflation out there. But all you have to do is look at that balance sheet, and there's a tremendous amount of money that sits around there that even if it comes out and starts being used, it will be putting pressure on the old-fashioned ways of measuring inflation with the CPI. But even that is starting to show that it's going up. But you don't have to have that. In the 20s, we never had that CPI. Everybody thought, there's no distortions in the 20s. The CPI is doing just fine. But the stock market was out of whack, and then that led into the 30s.
The NASDAQ, as you know, has hit 6,000. You're still a believer in gold. How do you explain the stock market strength, and are you still sticking by gold, Dr. Paul?
Oh, yeah, I think it sort of confirms it because all you have to do is go back to the year 2000 The Nasdaq was 5,000, and now it's all the way up to 6,000 after what 17 years. And gold back then was less than $300, and it's $1,200. So I would say gold has done very, very well in that period of time. And besides the 20% increase in the Nasdaq, if you discount for the inflation, there is inflation even by the conventional measurements. That's not the greatest investment in the world. So I would say that long term, and for me, the long term was the discovery or the acknowledging that once we went off gold completely in 1971, to me that meant there was no limitation on how much money would be printed, and it would undermine the soundness of our economy. And back then, gold was $35 an ounce, and the economy keeps really getting weaker. The middle class is not doing well. They're not getting richer. So if you have, they say there's some optimism right now. Maybe that's compared to a year ago when it was so much worse. But that can change. That's subjective. But the objectivity is government spending. Are they going to cut? Will we really get tax cuts? Will we ever stop being the policeman of the world? Will we always, pander to everybody who wants something? Is it demand a right to have something when the country is broke? And I think we are. There's no way they can pay these bills. Republicans spend money like Democrats, if not worse, and they're planning on spending a lot. I'm all for all the tax cuts regardless, but if they get the tax cuts and they don't cut any spending, they have another problem right there because that will cause the deficit to explode.
Dr. Ron Paul, it's always a pleasure to get your wide-ranging views. We appreciate you taking some time for us here on Trading Nation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Brian.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And thank you, folks, for tuning in to Trading Nation. Let us know what you think about the interview on social media. Love to hear from you. Take care.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.